All right, we are here. This is exciting, exciting times. I am so pleased to have this beautiful panel with me today. We're going to get started right away because we have a lot to get into. But first, I am going to make sure I launch this panel because I have a question for the viewers, and I want to get in your business a little bit. And I see you all are already answering. This is great. All right, this is working. We're going to come back to those results later. I'm going to formally start this Diversity and Inclusion Summit, let you know who I am, who these ladies are, and make sure that everything is here. Okay. Hello, hello. Welcome to this Diversity and Inclusion Summit, the first of many, I hope. I want to welcome everybody to the summit and let you know that this summit is brought to you by some sponsors of World Homeschoolers Day. We have Right at Home, 90-Minute School Day, Reconstruction, and Hewitt Learning. We have awesome sponsors. Those are the sponsors that are sponsoring this particular section of our free events that we're doing this year. And as you come in, as you've already started, please say hello in the chat. We can see the chat, as well as take that poll and let us know where you are in your homeschooling journey. So we'll check those results a little bit later. But first, I want to introduce you to myself as well as our panel. All right. I am Camille Kirksey of the Intuitive Homeschooler, and I'm the founder of World Homeschoolers Day. And I'm your host tonight. I'm a mom of three. I have a 15, 11, and 8-year-old, and we've been homeschooling since 2013. So we've been in it for a long time. I'm a homeschooling expert, a mindset coach, an author, and I am the creator of Homeschool U Academy, where I encourage, empower, and educate homeschool facilitators. That's what I call us, through my courses, workshops, books, as well as coaching. In 2001, I started World Homeschoolers Day for many reasons, but one of the reasons was that I wanted to start raising awareness for the diversity and inclusion inside the homeschooling community. And this summit this year, this is year 3, this summit is another step in the right direction. I would like to now introduce you to our panel of authors, speakers, writers, and fellow homeschool moms who will be discussing our topic this year, and that is valuing diversity and inclusion in home education, forging the path forward. So the first one I would like to introduce to you is Sarah. Sarah is a homeschooling mom and writer for the blog Anti-Racist Homeschooling. She has been a trauma-informed educator and interfaith pastor discussing the topic of diversity and inclusion for 10 plus years. She focuses on sharing the need for diverse homeschool resources that center biopic and LGBTQIA2+, disabled and female voices. And you can find her on the internet, on the interwebs at Anti-Racist Homeschooling. Then we have Robin Robertson, let me say your name right, an unschooling mom to 2 teens, the host of the podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, as well as a public school board trustee. You can find her at Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids on social media, her website, all podcast platforms, and in her community on the Clubhouse app. Then we have, sorry about that. For 15 years, we have Nicola Pizarro, a homeschooling mom of 2. She's worked to empower caregivers with science-based frameworks of early brain development, literacy instruction, and self-directed education. Nicola is an unschooler, author, consultant, and advocate. You can find her at Raising Readers on Instagram. Okay, here's Amber O'Neill Johnston, aka the Heritage Mom, the author of A Place to Belong, a guide for families of all backgrounds who want to raise kids to celebrate their heritage, community, and the world. She loves sharing about cultural books, poetry, music, and more at heritagemom.com and at Heritage Mom blog on Instagram. And are you on Facebook too? Facebook too. Excellent. So here is our panel of mamas and activists in our own way, and we're going to have a great conversation. Before we get started, I want to share a few points before we check out the results of the poll, as well as start our discussion. So as I mentioned before, there will be a Q&A portion at the end of our discussion. That's where you can go in that Q&A section and put in any questions that you have at the end of the discussion. There will also be a replay of the summit on YouTube. So once everything is uploaded, you'll get an email with the link to let you know it's available. You'll also, in that same email, get a survey for the summit to let us know about your experience and to help me shape future summits, because that's what I hope to do. And I really appreciate your feedback. You don't know how much I need, or anybody that does this kind of work needs feedback to know what you all want to see. And the last thing, and this is probably the most important point I want to make before we get started, is that diversity and inclusion are very hot topics right now. So I encourage everyone that's watching to keep an open mind, and really, if any kind of uncomfortable feelings come up, just kind of sit with them, kind of explore them, see what's going on with them, and just know that we're all here to learn and be encouraged to grow ourselves so we can help our kids do the same. All right, so before we get started with our discussion, let's check our poll results to see where everybody's at. I'm going to end the poll so we can see, hopefully you can, oh yeah, I can share the results. Oh, it's pretty clear. So it looks like most of you have been homeschooling between 2 and 5 years. That's the sweet spot. That's that, okay, I'm really getting it. I'm starting to get the flow together. And then it's pretty even where you haven't started, or you're under a year, or you're between 6 and 9 years. And then we have veterans out here at second place with 10 years or more. So across the board, there's all types of stages here. And that is exactly what we need, because no matter where you are on your homeschooling journey, embracing diverse and inclusive practices is always a really great idea. And it can sometimes be very humbling. We can realize I was doing something or thinking something that probably isn't the best choice. So whatever the case, I'm glad you're here, and you're ready to take on, or you continue with this challenge of being inclusive and helping people feel like they belong in this homeschooling community. So without further ado, let's get started with our conversation. And that's what this is. It's a conversation that you all get to watch amongst people who are doing this work. And I will not be checking the Q&A section until we're done. So anything you want to drop in there for any of us or all of us, please do that during the conversation. But we're going to get started with the first question. And this is for the whole panel. Now, I'm open to whoever wants to answer first. But I want to know how each of you really defines diversity and inclusion. Whoever wants to jump in. Or Amber. Let me pick on Amber. We can start there and kind of go counterclockwise.
So me, I see it as building environments where everyone is welcome, regardless of things to separate us. And it's really multi-dimensional. And as soon as we try to bullying this person and leave someone out, how he's fighting about. So rather than, everybody that's clear, it's just like, oh, you know what I mean?
Can you hear me? It's kind of I thought it would work out, but it's kind of garbled a little bit. I don't know. You were saying some good stuff. I know you were. I don't know. The sound was kind of garbled. I don't know what happened. But we can come back. Say it again.
Yeah.
It's still the same. I don't know. You may want to log out and come back. It's okay. We'll be here, but we'll move on. Sarah, how would you define diversity and inclusion?
Okay, so I think it's a little tricky to define it because there are so many different interpretations of both diversity and inclusion. But when I'm sort of thinking about this topic, I was talking about that I think diversity more is about sort of the representation whereas inclusion is more sort of the action of that representation. So including, or at least the opportunity to include that representation in the discussion, the broader discussion, and that diversity can certainly become appropriating if it doesn't have inclusion, and inclusion really can't be authentic without diversity. So I think that the interplay between the two is really helps us define it a little bit better as individual components.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for pointing that out, because it can overlap in people's minds, but it is very different. So thanks for that distinction. Yeah. Robin, how would you define them?
Actually, similar to Sarah. I think they are two, they're parts of a whole, but they're also two separate pieces, because you could have diversity and not have any inclusion whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And diversity, absolutely, it's respecting, it's enabling, it's having different perspectives and access. Diversity, when you think it's differences, right? It's not one single thing, it's many differences. But there's also a difference between having differences or opening to differences. But then inclusion also means the respect, empowerment, access part of that. But not only that, creating a safe place for diversity, or those who are diverse to a group, to be present and to be themselves and to be there. So that takes also actions, like Sarah said, and a concerted effort as well. And I think everyone has different places for that. So it takes work, for sure.
Yeah, even pulling those apart, how both of you did, it's very complex, but it's simple actions that get you to achieve both. But it's knowing the difference and being intentional definitely plays a huge part in it. Yeah. Nicola, what would you say?
For me, and Sarah and Robin, I love those. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I would say, to add on to that, for me, is diversity is telling the truth, right? And so when I think about what it is to be diverse, or what diversity is, to me, it's truth telling. And when I think about inclusion, I think about centering the margin, right? Centering what has not been centered. So to me, is a lot of truth telling and centering. And that's how we reverse engineering. The same with erasure. So when I think about the lack of diversity, then I think of erasure. And so if you reverse engineering, you get to diversity and inclusion, which is truth telling and truth living.
That's so good. That's so true. It is the opposite of what we see, what the systematic presence is. It is the opposite of that. So it takes work to figure that out and then implement what can lead to where we want to be, where we should be. I love that. I love all those. Those are great. So why now? Why do you think diversity and inclusion is the right topic for the conversation right now? What would you say, Robin?
Why not now? Look at the world that we live in as well, right? We look at things like technology, and how even something like homeschool, and we're talking about, we're all homeschoolers or unschoolers. We're in this panel. Almost everyone that is joining us today in this webinar are also looking at a different learning experience, most likely quite different from school or outside of that institution of school. And there is more opportunity and access now because of things like technology, because of things like global movement, and being able to have access to information and connect with others. Just the fact that I'm in a different country from all of the rest of you, and that I'm able to be here tonight with you as well and to talk about this. So now, especially with the access, technology, travel, and the openness to things like homeschooling, when I think before it was very closed, now is the time. And the other part of it is, I think with it becoming more open now, that means that many other people diverse sets of people in diverse places have access to this different life of learning, life without school, however you choose to define it, or you're choosing to live it. And I think it was limited before. But where we are now in our times right now, I'm not saying it's fully accessible to all, but there are more opportunities for families to try this kind of learning life with others. So yeah, absolutely. The time is now, because we're opening up to more people, to more communities, and all across the world. So
Absolutely. I would say for me, within the last 10 years of homeschooling, things are completely different. And there are so many new faces and new places. You know, homeschooling is very United States dominated, as you know, Robin. And just to see all over the world and how people go about it and the different cultures that are involved, it is a question of why not now, you know? Yeah. Sarah, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's great. And I think there was a mention in the previous question about this idea of truth telling. And I think right now, you know, we've always had this conversation about diversity and inclusion, but we sort of have this international platform right now. And we can see what happens when we keep ignoring the question. And we've kind of put this question off too long, that we keep ignoring it, and then we keep bearing the fruit of that decision to ignore it for too long. And we're losing this idea of what is our truth, what is our history. And we see with things like books being banned, and we see with this question of what is history, what is truth, and that we need an authentic answer to that question, that there are people, whether it be homeschool parents, but also even kids that are asking this question, sort of looking for the answer to what is diversity and inclusion, and you know, the impacts that it has on all of us in every sense of the word.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I think the children nowadays are very well informed about being world citizens. When I was growing up, it was really nice. It was a nice idea, but I didn't have that access. We didn't even have internet when I was a kid. So our kids are growing up with their friends can be people they've never met that live in a completely different continent. You know, it's amazing the amount of access that is given. At different levels and different ages. Before you had to wait till you were older, but now you don't. And it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. Amber, what would you say? Why should we be talking about diversity and inclusion, especially for homeschooling right now?
I think from, you know, what started as a very personal reason for me that I've seen play out with other people's families as well, is because for a lot of us, we're homeschooling not for the best academics in the whole world, although we may be giving that, but for the whole person, and for our children's emotional health, and you know, their health as full people. And so for success, we're not necessarily looking how much money your first job offer is when you decide to go into the workforce, if that's what you do, but more like how healthy and whole can I present you to the world, and can you make your way? And for my children, when they weren't being seen in our materials and the things that I was prioritizing as education in our home, it was horrible. It kind of ended up being like a bit of a train wreck. And I realized then that this isn't about math and science and history and all of those things, but this is about what my child thinks that I feel about her and where she fits in this world. So I think that applies to every family, and no matter what their background is. So what their children are learning about themselves and what they're learning about other people in their homes is the overriding cause, you know?
Yeah, we can't wait. We can't wait. Our kids are growing up every day. We can't wait. So we have to have these hard conversations and grow from them. Absolutely. That's a great point. Nicola, what would you say?
For me, and I loved what Robin said, why not? I feel like it's always the right time to do the right thing. And if that is, you live with that type of urgency, that's a great way to live. For me also is that I approach homeschooling as not the answer, but certainly a answer and a way to create possibility, right? So when I am looking out into the world, I know that through homeschooling, through self-directed learning, through community-based learning, and divesting ourselves from compulsory schooling and mass schooling, that we can create a more beautiful possibility, and a possibility that we deserve. And in order, and because I believe in that, then I know that there's no truth in that if we don't open it up and make sure that there's space and there's room created for others, and that we make this accessible for all types of family, and that within the access or the existing families that we're centering in truth telling. And so because I so believe in homeschooling and self-directed education, then I want it to be real and true.
Yeah, because if not, what are you doing? Really, what are you doing?
We're
And
not here to uphold, right? We're here to disrupt and tell the truth.
yeah, because it's like, homeschooling, of course, always has this, indoctrination type of thing. But, sometimes it's good to make sure your kids are indoctrinated in themselves and self-awareness and family values that are not just limiting. It's about the world and acceptance and belonging, and social and emotional growth, and mental health is important. Amber, you mentioned that. And it's just a lot of these things have to be talked about because they haven't been, and people have suffered and it's caused harm. And so we have to, as homeschooling parents, leading the way, leading this charge, and of course, raising our kids, we have to be the ones, like you said, to disrupt and to do things differently. It's the time. It's our time, which is why it's happening right now.
Can I just add something
Yes,
to that?
absolutely.
Especially what everyone said, and what you just said as well, and talking about, our learning is community-based learning. And I love that, that phrase or that example relating to it. And also the fact that you said, that we're talking about truth telling as well. And that so many stories haven't been told and they've actually been denied. And, Amber, you're talking about what you've experienced within your family, but also as whole communities, what whole communities have experienced when their history and their truth have been completely either wiped out or denied, or something completely different was told. And the trauma that communities now have faced or are facing, and how generations are still dealing with that. I think that's another important reason why it's important, because if we are talking about our social emotional learning, our mental health, and we are fortifying our families also extend into our communities. So as we're doing this work for ourselves and our immediate families, we're also trying our best to do the work for our communities so that we can all be healthy families and communities, because we're not living in a complete bubble. We have to go out. We have to see others. There's a reciprocity, right? So I think it is important now, because we are also seeing the effects of what's happened by denial, by erasing, by eradicating. And, here, because I live in Canada, there is, the government has a movement that they call Truth and Reconciliation. And it's really to Truth and Reconciliation for Indigenous communities of Canada, First Nations, Métis, Inuit. And, you have similar history with residential schools in the United States as well. And the history that was denied, but generations, like my friends' parents attended residential school. That's how close it is, right? Wow. It's not generations ago, it's right here, right now. I graduated in 1995, the last school closed in 1997. So, so now is an important time if we want to heal, and if our world and our communities want to get better, and we want our kids, as they're growing up into this world, to have a world that's an actual world for human beings to live in. So that was just my add to that as well.
Absolutely. So many great, that's a whole nother summit, girl. We can talk about that for days. There's so many things that are included in that. And I just want to say this before we move forward. I love how you brought up like obviously not the fact that your friends' parents were in a residential school, but how close history it is. None of this stuff is, 16th century. This stuff is within the last 100 years, 150 years. Our grandparents saw a lot of these things. Our great-grandparents felt the direct harm from a lot of these things we just read about. And that, that's a whole nother conversation. But I love that you bring that up because it is so close to us, but it doesn't feel like it. So it's good that we can make those connections with our kids and say, hey, the civil rights movement, your grandmother was a kid. It was not back in ancient history like it always appears to be. Yes, that's a really great point. So Amber, why should homeschoolers care about diversity and inclusion? This is a two-parter. And what are the long-term consequences if we ignore it, if we ignore them? Why should we care, and what will happen if we ignore them?
I think we're getting to see the results of these things being ignored right now. It's chaos. It's chaotic because you have a couple of problems. You have the result of feeling erased and what that does to a person and what it does to the people they're raising and what it does to their communities. And so you have that on one side. And you also have the damage of finding the truth out later. And in some cases, people are unable to accept it. They have been fed the same story for so long that even when they have this moment where people are telling them, actually, that isn't what happened, or this is not true, and what you thought was true wasn't true. Some people are able to, when know better, you do better. But what we see every day now is the resistance of people who are like, I cannot change what I have always felt is true. It's like, it terrifies them. And I think that's scary. And so if we don't start with the children, where the things that we're talking about, where they are growing up with things normalized and like, this is what life is, and this is how it is, and honesty and truth, then we're left with either the hurt, pain, and trauma of being ignored, or you're left with needing to make a big leap later in life that a lot of people find hard to make.
Mm-hmm. Such good points. Sarah, what would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with that. And two, as a trauma-informed educator, this is kind of the results of trauma, this idea that we have generationally denied people the access to their own stories and their own history and their own truth-telling. And there's power in truth-telling. There's power in our stories and our narratives. And so we're seeing the results of the long-term consequences of denying that for so long. So I think to answer the question, why should homeschoolers care about this? I think that those who have already felt the pains of that are already know why we should care about it, because we've sort of suffered, we felt that. And then those who are witnessing that, just I think general empathy, right? This idea that we should care that we are causing trauma and suffering in one another, regardless of what maybe our differences and belief systems are, that we are humans and we should see that there are children who are suffering because of the way we've done things. And it's not really an excuse anymore for us to just say, well, it's just been done that way. We've got to move forward. And so before I was a homeschool mom, I was a homeschooler myself. And coming from a Middle Eastern family, I didn't see any resources that represented me. And so I didn't see resources that defined who my family was as Middle Eastern, as I had a mother who was in a wheelchair, so disabilities. And I never saw any of those things represented. And that loss of my identity and my story is what drives me to do what I do. And it drives me to be the homeschool parent that I am today, so that my children can see themselves represented, so that I can see myself represented, and that other kids everywhere can see themselves represented, because it causes that trauma, just as Amber was mentioning, that pain that we have when we don't choose to give everybody the same opportunity to share their story.
That's so powerful. So many good points you made. And I was just talking to my husband about growing up and not really realizing how white things were. And then when you become older and you look at these things, it's like, it's not just that I was a kid and just didn't pay attention, but there is trauma there, because I'm like, I really didn't see myself in these places, and I didn't see a lot of things that culturally were normal for me. But now I'm trying to make traction and make a lot of headway on my own personal journey. And that's what you're talking about, Amber. It's a lot of work that a lot of people don't have time. They're just trying to survive. So imagine trying to get to know yourself and accepting things and other people while you're just trying to make ends meet. It's really difficult. So it's so great to have that starting point as a child to say it's normal to, feel these things and to see all types of people and to understand people have different abilities, and that it's okay. That's a good thing. Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Nicola, what would you say? What kind of information would you want to share about that question? Why should we care?
I think that to what everyone has said, I think that we have to continually ask people who have been marginalized or of because of our descent and our identities. I think that we understand it and we feel it. And so of course this is important because the lack of it causes harm. But I also want to share that when we don't do that, we experience a more beautiful existence, right? You cannot dehumanize other people and really be in your full humanity, right? So everyone is hurt when other people are stripped of their humanity. And when we center humanity in ourselves and in others, we get to experience humanity in its full spectrum, right? And so it is enriching to our lives. And so not only do I want myself to heal from trauma, and I want to step into the fullness of my humanity, but I also want my children and their peers and this next generation to experience the expansiveness of what this journey is when we really center humanity. I want that for us. I love that for us. I want it for us. And so when we're like, let's do the work, it's because the possibility on the other side of the work is like, for anybody who's done doula work, like labor, birthing is laborious, right?
Literally.
But on the other side of this is life, right? And it's beauty. So like, let's get to it, right?
Yes.
That's my perspective, because I know that on the other side, there's an expansiveness that I want for all of us.
There's a freedom. There's a freedom with that. And it's not even just your personal freedom. Once you go through that journey and unlock it, it's a generational freedom. You've broken that chain. And a lot of times, even with homeschooling, I don't know if you all have noticed this, but if you have resistance from the older people in your family, once you start doing it and you're like, I love you, I'm gonna do this anyway, they become your biggest cheerleaders, and it gives them hope. It gives them freedom. It lets them experience things and question things that they never could before. So I love that you brought that up, because it's beneficial to everybody once you do the work. And let's get to it. That's what we're doing here. I love that. Robin, we're going to take you to the next question. Can you explain how you personally include diverse and inclusive practices in your homeschooling efforts?
How I personally do that, or how my family personally does that. Mm-hmm. So, conversation, stories. We have a chance to, the reason why we first began homeschooling is because we wanted to travel with our kids. And we wanted our kids to see more of the world, and that the world looks similar to them, but also different from them as well. We have our family is kind of scattered all over the place in many different countries. And we also wanted our kids to have a chance to connect with family that they wouldn't get a chance to connect with if we stayed in one place all of the time. And that was really important to us for our personal education and knowledge and history and growth. So those are some of the ways to stay connected with that, even just our personal family history and stories and understanding. But otherwise, that also goes for our broader community. and sharing the stories and history as well of those that we either know or don't know that are within our community that make up our world and our community and history too. I was thinking about it today because a friend and I were talking about it the other day. It's also, and I do have to say, it's probably a little bit different for my family as well, because, and I guess, you draw people that are similar to you, right? So for my family, we could probably say that we have a more diverse community than maybe some other homeschoolers do. And it happens that, we attract different people, but also because we're very open to that. And we want to see our reflection, but at the same time, we want to know others as well. So I think really so much in our conversations and how we choose to live. And we try to just learn and engage and be out in our community as well. And our direct community, but our broader community as well. So, and many times I've found through years of homeschooling that, we unschool, so we don't follow a set curriculum. But when we did, it was also in those early days, realizing that the curriculum didn't work for us because so much of what was presented or what our kids had to learn, number one, they didn't want to do it because they saw they didn't see the immediate value of, okay, I always give the example of my son when he was in grade 4, grade 3, and the outcome for social studies was, the world is going global and to see the differences and similarities between yourself and others in the world. And, just because of how we live and who our family is and where we have been, he gets that. Like he lives that every day. He has been a majority. He has been a minority, everything. Like he understands that outcome without having to study about the 3 countries they listed you have to study for.
Right.
So for him, he was like, why do I have to learn about this, this, and this? Like, he was like, I would rather learn about this, this, and this place, which I'm already learning about, or I'd rather do this and this. And so, for us, that was kind of, us letting go of that set standard curriculum and creating a life learning and a life curriculum that better suited us and the reflection of what we wanted to see the world and how we saw the world and how it is. So I hope that answers the question,
Yeah,
but that's how we try and live it in our homeschooling life.
Yeah, it sounds very intentional. It's already embedded in how you live, but it's also intentional to where if it's not something that you personally experience, it's something that you seek out and it seeks you too, it sounds like. Yeah. How would you answer that, Amber? What are some things that, some examples? Because I think when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it feels really good, but that practical side, like how do I do it? What are some ways that you do that with your family?
For me, first, I had to do a lot of unlearning myself, because one of the things I struggled with was feeling like the things that weren't the most traditional were not as good. And so therefore, my child wouldn't be as well prepared or wouldn't be as well accepted if we weren't like, if we were to memorize, poems from different poets instead of Keats or whatever, then my kid's not going to know this stuff that all the people are supposed to know. So for me, it was a lot of unlearning, and I say almost like going through a hair journey, but with education, where I have to learn to love myself first and to accept myself and to be okay with this. Then that was the first step. So now what do we do? It's mostly books, art, music, food, poetry, nature, and relationships. So a lot of it is storytelling, and it's storytelling within my family, but it's also storytelling. And when people are like, well, what does nature have to do with it? With the understanding of I want you to be free here because you belong on this land, and the things that we're doing out here, and we weren't always welcome here, but you don't have to take that and run with that. But you can be free, run, put your toes in the sand, walk on this hiking trail and feel like I belong here. So there's storytelling that goes along with things that don't even immediately come across as being related to diversity or inclusion or whatever. And I think it's also the way we talk about other people in our home, and with an expectancy, like we expect to like be cool with a lot of people. We don't think this is like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be so hard and we're gonna have to do. It's like, yeah, I like her. I'm down with that. It's just this casual and normalcy. So I think those are the things. And now that I'm on the other side of having to work through so many emotional things myself, I actually find it easier to live this way than what I was doing before. So it was hard to walk through the fire, but on the other side of it, now I'm fully me. So it's easy for me to teach my kids and the things that we do. And that's why I share, because I want that freedom for other people.
Yes, that went right where you were talking about, Nicola, how it's hard work, but it's worth it. It's worth it, especially if you have a community that gets it and supports what you're doing and can give you tools like what we're doing today. Yeah, thank you for that. And Nicola, what would you say? What are some ways that you bake those into your homeschooling?
Well, Amber, first let me say that I love that you brought nature, because we're a big nature family. And I think that that's number one teacher of how you can understand diversity, and the perfection of it is really time and nature. She really is the best teacher, because there is so much micro diversity is nature's way, right? This is like neurodiversity is nature's way. Like all the entire spectrum is found in diversity, and everybody, there's just this ecosystem and how things work. And the more you spend time in nature, the more that just feels right, and that you get it, and how the opposite is harmful, right? So when you like talk about even modern agriculture, and so how monocultures really hurt the land versus the way that food naturally grows, you just understand, you start to see that value in it. And so spending time with nature is a huge part of just unlearning and appreciating. And I think that that's really big in my family. The other thing, and I think that this is true for families of marginalized backgrounds and different intersections, is that it's okay to go through your phase where you're like, I'm going to paint my house. Like my house is blackly black, right? Everything is like that's just what we are, right? Because you spend all of these lifetimes of not experiencing that, and you have to come into your fullness. And for my children, for my household, that is where we started. And we'll still very blacky black, right? But then we started looking through the intersection of that. Okay, so it's not just Black people like us, but Black people like the entire diaspora. It's not just Black people like us, but neurodiverse people. It's not just Black people like us, but then we went into class, right? And so we have to be aware of class. We have to be aware of neurodiversity. We have to be aware of our abilities. And so we started going from there outward. And then once that becomes your experience and you expand in that, then everything makes sense. And so which is a different experience than, for example, if we were not a Black family, we would not do it that way. But for us, that's just the way that it was. And I want to quickly say about baking, just because this came up with me. And like when you have relationships, who said relationships? I think it was Robin. This is how you bake it in. So we met a parent that has a child with a physical disabilities. And I remember when I was young, my children were first born, I used to throw away dolls, whatever they would like break a leg or break an arm or break an eye or anything like that. And once I met her and she said, can I just share something with you? And I said, yeah. She said, this desire to have perfection in your toys is really ableist, because it is showing your children that when body parts or certain pieces of a person get damaged, we just throw that toy away that is not useful. And it radicalized the way that we play in my home, my practice. I rewrote entire sections of my lesson plans and books. And so it is in relationships. The more relationships and the more that you're open to those relationships and to centering the lives of others who you too may be marginalizing, right? When you're willing to do that, then you stop baking it in and you start centering it.
Woo. Okay, y'all done said everything. We got to move on to the next, because I'm telling you, I'm getting chills and teary-eyed because it's just so much truth happening right now. But we're going to move forward because I'm not about to be crying on here. All right, Sarah. And this is our last question, ladies. And I want everyone to answer. What is your biggest piece of advice for getting started with diversity and inclusion with children? And I think we've talked about that, but let's talk about it some more.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I'll break it down. I'll try to make it short, but definitely I think starting right now is the biggest thing, right? It's never too early to start and it's never too late to start. I think a lot of times we have to get this idea in our mind that if we don't start at the right time, it's too late. Or if we, is it too early? It's right now is the perfect time. And so normalizing diversity in everything we do is, I think, the key, and it's important, regardless whether it's math or science or history or art or just nature studies, going outside. Normalize seeking out diversity and inclusion and looking for different perspectives, looking for different voices. And I think that this was mentioned in the last question from everybody, this idea that it's relationship, right? This idea that if we're building relationships, I think that sort of naturally comes. We begin to sort of, the more experiences we have, we can naturally observe this, and our children tend to as well. And so I think the last point of advice is for me would be to just allow your children to lead, because so often we look at homeschooling as it's like we're teaching our kids rather than we're letting our kids learn and allowing them to kind of grow. And I think I'm not the only mom who has had this experience where maybe having children who always ask question after question after question, and sometimes maybe inappropriate questions, and we're like, don't say that or don't ask that. Well, of course. And I think that that's a way we can build diversity and inclusion in our children, is letting them lead us, because they're going to lead us where they need to be, what they need to learn, even in maybe subtle or subversive biases that they may have or things that they don't understand, that those are opportunities for us to teach our children. So we always get scared if our child says something racist or something that is inappropriate, but those are the exact moments for us to sort of regulate, take a pause, and realize that this is our opportunity to learn together, rather than just saying, oh, we don't talk about that, or oh, we don't need to address that, or oh, we don't think that way, right? It's just sort of allowing our children to lead where we're going.
Absolutely. We all agree with that. I can speak for everybody. Yeah. Robin, what would your one piece of advice for getting started be?
Well, if you're just getting started, I would probably say, very similar to what Sarah said, be open to learn, especially, let your kids lead, but also model it yourself by being open to others and learning and, asking questions, because especially if you're just getting started, if you're just entering to the world of diversity, even before inclusion, there's probably a lot of education, like personal learning and education to be done right there. So that's a beginning space. Reflection and seeing what you don't know. I know sometimes it's hard to understand, like, I don't know what I don't know, but just like going out and I always thought this belief, okay, how could it be different? What are the, what else could be out there? Where can I learn about this? And can I challenge that? Can I find new perspectives? And because if you're looking for a place to begin, I think that's definitely a place to begin, because then it goes back again, like everyone was saying, relationships, centering humanity. If we're going back to that space, then it also goes back to that internal work piece of ourself, of getting back to the heart of who we are and what's important. And if it is about the social emotional, if it's about the heart practice, then it's you kind of have to go there, right? If it is about the heart, but also beginning with yourself.
And we always encourage our kids to be curious. right? So if we aren't curious, if we aren't challenging things and asking questions, we're not being good role models. Like you were saying, you have to model it. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Nicola, what would your one piece of advice be?
As homeschoolers, we have a little bit more time to center and define what our values are. And so I think that if you're just getting started, you can say, hey, what are our core truths and core values? And from there, everything can flow. And so, like, for my family, is us understanding that, you know, Black people have always made everything cooler and have touched everything on this planet. And that's just the truth, that we're on, like, that we are on stolen land, that disability happens to everyone at any point in our lives, right? That gender is a construct and nobody's business and no one can tell them what to do. Like, we have certain things that are true. And then everything flows through that. But if we don't take the time to define what we think is true as families, then we have no grounding. And so it doesn't matter what curriculum you're picking or this or that, right? You're just kind of, you have no grounding. So take the time to define your truth and then flow from there.
Yes, yes, yes. Amber. what would you-
I agree. The first thing I was going to say is focusing on growing yourself. I think that what happens is we want so much for our kids that we start expecting them to do more than what we're doing. We want them to do this and think this about people and be friends with all these people and do all this. And it's just like, sis, are you doing any of those things in your own life? So I think that was a really good one. The other thing I would say is to start with the low-hanging fruit, and that's different for every family. So don't start with the part that's like overwhelming to you and really, really hard. Like if you go on field trips a lot, then be more intentional about where you go and who you listen. You go to performances a lot, go to different types of performances. You guys listen to music every day in your house, listen to more music, different music. Like it doesn't have to be, you're just going to be a totally different family. The things that you already do can and should be where you start.
That's such good practical advice. And I love that we're ending on that because it gives people something tangible. Start where you are, stay curious, focus on relationships, be intentional, all these things that we're probably doing already, but we have a little bit more focus on. Also make sure we're including other people and looking at things in a more holistic way than really narrow and focus. Like this is the only way to do it. Because we know with homeschooling, we know there's not one way to do it. And there's different seasons of doing it. One month it can work, next month it doesn't. And you gotta stay curious and figure out what flows. This has been a beautiful, beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful. We could have talked for a whole nother hour. But we're coming up on the end of our time. I want to go into the questions. If anyone, I'm going to open it up to see if anyone has. Okay, looks like conversation's been going on. Let's go. I want to see if there's any questions. And unfortunately, we won't get to many, but if you want to submit them, maybe there's something that we can answer after this. I'll go to the first one I see is Alicia from Michigan. What advice do you have for families that were forced into homeschooling because of COVID and that are continuing to homeschool to keep their families safe from the pandemic that is shown to be more devastating for biopic communities? So I guess what's something that we can say just to encourage this mom who didn't necessarily choose to homeschool, but is doing so to make sure that her family is safe? Any quick responses?
I'll say I didn't start homeschooling for that reason, but I never intended to homeschool. It wasn't something that I was sitting at home dreaming about or anything like that. It long story short, I fell into it and ended up loving it. And I think that regardless of the path that you took to get somewhere, when you're there, that you have all the opportunities in the world to fall in love with it and to really lean in and take all from it that you can and give all that you can. So I don't completely know like which aspect of it she was looking for, but I would just say like, if you feel left out because you're not this like rah, homeschooling's in my blood type person, that
that there's a lot of us that are not like that.
Yeah, most of us probably aren't. And I would say, you know, follow us on Instagram if you feel, because she went on to say, talking about things aren't accessible as far as co-ops and lack of, I'm not sure. I think she was just trying to say, basically, she's looking for community. I would say follow us. All of our handles are on the emails, on my Instagram. Start with us. I think we're a great bunch to get you started. And definitely, you know how algorithms work. Once you start following a certain type of folks, other people will show up. And I'll do one more question. It looks like, okay, we already defined what diversity and inclusion is. Yeah, I think we answered her question during, or whoever this was, it was anonymous. So I think we covered that. And I don't see any other questions here. That's great. All right, we are almost at 7 o'clock. Again, I thought this conversation was beautiful. We could have continued it on for another hour, but we're going to get out of here on time. Again, thanks everybody for being here. This will be on replay on YouTube once I get everything up and running. Everybody's @ will be in the email, on my website, on all of the promotions, so you can follow everyone on this panel. As you can tell, we are amongst wise women who are doing this work, and we are not playing. Okay, we're getting at it, Nicola. We are not playing, Nikolai. We are not playing. Okay, so I wish everyone well. The book fair is going on. You can go to worldhomeschoolersday.com/book fair and check that out. And again, follow every mama that's here. You will be better for it. And I appreciate everyone here, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Camille. Thanks, everyone. I learned a ton.
Okay. I did too. It was beautiful, beautiful. Thank you all.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.